from Los Angeles. This is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
84% of all teachers in public schools are white. We know the majority of kids in most public schools are black and brown, particularly in big urban areas. And white teachers go through no training about how to work with black and brown communities, children, their parents. They're just thrown in without any effort to address the big elephant in the room.
That's right. I have a master's in cross-cultural education, and I was required to take one diversity class. And most teachers aren't given even that. And it's that same notion of, I don't care if my kids are blue, purple, green, or red, we treat them all the same, this belief, and that we don't see the race of our students, which is simply not true. It's been proven and disproven 1,000 times. So no, teachers are not equipped. And that's part of what we hope to do with this book, is to get into teacher training programs, because we want to stop the harm before it starts, right? And so many teachers are walking into those classrooms that are predominantly black and brown students with no racial literacy. And they think that these reenactments, which we basically in this book say, please just skip the reenactments, just don't do them, right? That oftentimes it's this thought, well, I'm going to burst their bubble, or they don't know about these atrocities and it's my job to teach them. And the best way to teach it is for them to experience a taste of it. And so
I guess you're right. I mean, we've gone through this period in this country with this whole notion of color blindness, right? I don't see color. All kids are the same. It doesn't matter. And somehow, again, if you're bringing up race, sometimes you're called a racist for even talking about race, or you're divisive. That happens to me often on this show. People call me a racist because I talk a lot about race. So I guess I shouldn't be as surprised. And when I think about it, I'm really not surprised. But it's still disturbing nonetheless, right? That we are as evolved as we are in some ways in this country, but yet we are so far behind on these really important topics. Let's talk about critical race theory. Again, this big umbrella term, well, more honestly, a legal concept taught in legal, a part of legal education in law schools, not widely taught outside of graduate school programs, professional school programs, but yet has become this umbrella term, this, really bad, horrible term that a lot of white legislators in the South, red states, want to use to, again, somehow make it a bad thing to talk about race. And everything gets pushed under this umbrella of critical race theory. So help us understand how in the book you deal with critical race theory.
Well, as you so well described where it came from, back in the 1980s, we were trying to explain the racial disparities that had persisted in spite of the civil rights movement. So we had this movement, but look what's happening. By any measure, we still see that this racial discrimination is rampant throughout our society. What's happening? Without critical race theory, really, we're just blaming black and brown people and saying it's their fault. Why can't they just get ahead, right? We don't know what's wrong. We had a civil rights movement. Everything's good. And so critical race theory is really important to be able to say there are systems that have been put in place in this country since its founding, right, to be able to make sure that we have these ongoing racial disparities. So some can profit and some will not. And so I think really understanding that it's a system, and if we don't have critical race theory, then again, we're just gonna blame people for what's happening to them. So again, you're right. We don't teach it in schools necessarily. I get to teach it in my graduate school program, and my students are so grateful for the framework, and they find it really helpful. But again, this is another tactic to be able to say, I'm uncomfortable. And so if I can name this thing and say that's bad, again, a very effective campaign. We want parents and teachers to be well educated and know talking about race isn't necessarily critical race theory, but what it means is that we understand that we're not going to blame kids or blame families or blame people for the racial discrimination they're experiencing. We're going to be insightful and thoughtful about where it comes from. We're going to talk about ways that we can interrupt it and challenge it. And kids know, I always say white kids, parents will say, oh, I think my children feel guilty and shameful, when they have to talk about being white. And I said, when I talk with white students, you know what they feel bad about? They feel bad about racism. They know racism is this horrible thing. They have friends who are Black and brown who they see things happening and they're like, why is my friend being treated differently than me? Again, we don't give them the words to help them know what's happening. Then they may end up blaming their friends or thinking it's something about them or thinking it's something about their family or something they said. So it's a really important structure. It just really talks about racism as a system, that it's operating in all these different ways. It's not just about a bad white person here or there doing or saying something that doesn't seem fair. And so I hope that we can continue to talk about the importance of how important it is to talk about racial identity. We need to be talking about race, and that's actually the only way that we're going to dismantle racism.
Yeah, and Jenna, we've seen this whole issue around critical race theory also get expanded to even conversations about the Holocaust, and some states and some school districts trying to prevent honest conversations about the Holocaust for fear, again, that it's going to make some kids uncomfortable, maybe Jewish kids, maybe German kids. Again, how do we address that? How do we have conversations about history and teach factual things that happened in our country and in other countries in the world without this fear that somebody goes home feeling, that the finger has been pointed at them personally?
Yeah, the Holocaust is an interesting phenomenon because we also get told that we are reenacting the Holocaust by talking about race, that without the discussion, we're causing segregation, which will ultimately lead to the next Holocaust. So it's been used in all sorts of ways. And what we know is the more we can talk about race in whatever circumstance, then we give kids a more nuanced understanding beyond you are bad or good simply because of the color of your skin. And we give frameworks, like Elizabeth talked about, understanding systems, right? Like all of the honors and advanced classes tend to have more white students in them. It's not because they are inherently superior based on the color of their skin, and not all of the Black and brown students are defective because of the color of their skin. It's simply just a lie. And we need to be having those conversations. Kids can handle complexity beyond what we think they can, and they ask for it all the time. They're begging for it. Please help us. Tell us what's going on, because we're seeing it on the news, we're seeing it on the internet, and nobody is talking to us about it. White kids, I should say. Nobody's talking to white kids about it.